Welcome to the Painting Coach, and today we're going to be painting those premium demon hunters of the Imperium, the Grey Knights. I'm going to walk you through painting the brand new Grandmaster Nemesis Dreadknight kit. A huge thanks to Games Workshop for sending this out to me. So without any further ado, let's get painting. So one of the first things I've done is use sub-assemblies. Now, I've left the top half of the torso and the legs separate, and I've left the head off the Grandmaster and the shields, and also that left greave, which I'm going to paint a different colour. I've sprayed the whole thing with Leadbelcher, and then I've sprayed it with some matte varnish. I'll explain why in the next step. And that greave and the shield, I've sprayed them with white scar spray, just to give me a nice bright background to build up the heraldry. The first thing I'm going to do is really darken down the exoskeleton on the knight, and the colour I'm going to use for that is Nuln Oil. So I'm going to paint this over everything that's not going to be a bright armour panel. Now, in the first step, I explained I'd sprayed this with some matte varnish. Now, I used it through the airbrush. You can use a can of matte varnish. You can use Tamiya flat spray as well. If I was going to use a can, that's the one I'd use, even though it's expensive. And the reason is because sometimes when you spray a metallic, it becomes quite hydrophobic. So you try to put paint on it, what you'll see, it won't cover it, it'll bead up. So what's really important with this is we've got a nice key on the surface from the matte varnish, so we can just work our way around building up the Nuln Oil. It's really important though that we don't get it into any of the silver parts that are going to be the bright silver. They're going to be nice and shiny, and it's also important that it doesn't pool too heavily. When that's completely dry, I'm going to give that a little bit of a buff with a dry brush. I'm using one of my Artist Opus Series D dry brushes. Use the link in the description. You can get up to 5% off with my special code. And all I'm doing with this is a bit of a traditional dry brushing with some Leadbelcher. Now, this is why it's really important that Nuln Oil is completely dry. It doesn't matter so much if you catch the armor panels with this one, but we do just want to work our way around catching those edges so that we do get a little bit of light, and also bring a little bit of shine back to the armor as well. And obviously, don't forget, I'm doing this over all the elements that are going to be silver. So it's not just the legs, it's also the top of the torso as well. Next up, we'll go in and put the base on all of the bright, shiny armor panels. So it'll be no surprise, I'm going to use Grey Knight Steel, which is a really nice it's kind of a dark silver, but it's got a blue hint to it as well. And that's why it's really nice. Now, it is a little bit of a thin paint, so you might need 2 coats in some places. And I would definitely recommend this approach because you don't want lumpy bits of paint. You don't want streaky brush marks in it. So if it does take you a little bit longer, then that's probably for the best. Whilst we're doing the armor panels on the Dreadknight itself, we're also going to paint the armor of the Grey Knight as well. So that Grandmaster, he's got the same color armor as the majority of the Dreadknight. Once we've worked through that, we're now going to enhance the kind of blue reflection that we've got on that armor. So I'm going to take some Drakenhoff Nightshade. Now, this isn't thinned down, this is straight from the pot, but I've got very little on my brush. What I want to do is work it across all of the silver armour, but I want to brush it down towards the bottom. So I'm not flooding the armour panels, I'm just brushing it towards the bottom. If I do get any bits where it pools up, then I'm going to go back in with the brush very quickly and move that around so it doesn't pool. So rather than putting on a flood of wash onto the model, we're essentially putting a very, very thin layer on. And this is just going to darken things down. Make sure you get it into all the recesses as well, because it's going to provide that differentiation between the armor panels. But just take your time with this. If you do make any mistakes or it does pool too heavily, then you can pop over it with some more Grey Knight Steel just to fix it. Once that's completely dry, you should have a really nice bluey silver. So we need to just enhance this a little bit now and add some highlights on there. The first thing we're going to do is go back to that Grey Knight Steel, and I'm again using one of my Artist Opus Series D dry brushes, and I'm going to stipple this across all of the shiny parts of the model. So I'm going to leave that darker blue in the recesses and towards the bottom of the panels, and I'm just going to work my way around stippling this over everything. And this is going to give me a really nice transition into a brighter silver grey colour rather than the darker blue we've got in the recesses. Next up, using the same brush, I'm going to do a 50-50 mix of Grey Knight Steel and Chrome from Vallejo Model Air. If you haven't got this, something like Runefang Steel will be absolutely fine. But it's a 50-50 mix, so it's a brighter silver, but it's still got that blue hint. And I'm going to go back in with exactly the same dry brush I used in the previous step, and I'm going to stipple this along those areas of highlight. Now, this is going to give me nice big area highlights rather than edge highlights, but it is just going to enhance the look of the knight. And obviously, don't forget, we're also doing the Grandmaster at the same time. So work your way across the model. This should be a fairly quick step because we're only looking for bits of the armor that catch the most light. So there's going to be some areas that we don't have to worry about at all. The final highlight on all of the silver is going to be a little bit of chrome from Vallejo Model Air. Now, all we're going to do with this is edge highlights. So we're just going to drag it across all the sharp edges of the armour that are going to catch all that light. Now, this is a little bit brighter than everything else we've put on there, but it just enhances the look of the model so that it becomes a little bit more readable on the tabletop. In all honesty, you could probably get away without doing this stage, but if you are going to do it, make sure you've got a good tip on your brush and make sure you haven't got too much paint either, because that can also lead to flooding areas. It can also lead to jagged, ugly looking highlights. So with all the armor finished, let's move on to some of the red elements. Now, there are quite a few across the model. So we've got the casing for the arm-mounted weapons. We've got the book on the back of the backpack, and there's going to be some design elements as well, including the greave and also the shield. So I'm going to use Khorne Red for this. I'm just going to work it across. I'm not going to be too tidy on some of these areas. I am, if I'm going past an area that's already finished, such as the silver, but generally we'll be able to paint over a few of these later on anyway. When it comes to the design on the shield and the greave, I've just picked something very similar to what's on the box art, but I've just gone for a slightly different orientation of the elements. So I'm going to paint the one half in red, and to do this, I'm just very carefully painting a red line down the middle of the greave, and then I'm going to fill in the other half of it, and exactly the same for the shield. Next up, we need to shade all of those red areas, and the colour I'm going to use for this is Nuln Oil. So again, I want to work this into all of the recesses, making sure that it gets nice and deep. I don't want to spill too much on the surface area of the red, because that makes it a little more difficult to clean up later. So I do just want to keep an eye on it as it dries. As for that book on the back as well, I'm going to work the Nuln Oil into that because it's very nice and textured. So there's plenty of area to work it in. Just like I said, keep an eye so it doesn't pull too heavily. So the first thing we'll highlight is all the weapon casing. Now, the colour I'm going to use for this is Mephiston Red, because this is going to be a nice bright red versus the slightly darker red that we'll have on some of the material elements, such as the back of the book cover. So generally, I'm going to paint quite a bit of the model with the Mephiston Red. It's really essential the Nuln Oil is dry before this stage as well. But generally, just work your brush around, making sure that you're giving that casing a nice bright red highlight. This, like I said, it's not an edge highlight. This is generally quite a thick highlight. So everything that's facing upwards, we're going to paint with the Mephiston Red. And I'm also going to use this on the shield and the greave as well to start highlighting up those areas. Next up, we'll highlight using Evil Sunz Scarlet. So this is when we're going to get into more of a line highlight. So generally, we're going to drag our brush across the shape of all the models. Now, this is particularly good because there's lots of nice angular parts. I'm using a size 3 Artist Opus Series S brush for this. You don't necessarily need a small brush. You just need to make sure you've got a good tip and not too much paint on there. If you do make a mistake here, it's really easy to clear it up with some Mephiston Red, but generally this should be nice, easy and straightforward. Again, this is a line highlight, so it can be fairly chunky, but you don't have to worry too much about that. Just try and get really, really nice, sharp lines. The last highlight on all of the red is going to be with some Wild Rider Red, and I'm going to use this across exactly the same areas as the Evil Sunz Scarlet. I've swapped to a size 1 Artist Opus brush for this, and generally I'm doing exactly the same thing though. I'm just dragging it across the sharp edges of the model, making sure that I get a nice crisp highlight. So this can be a fairly quick exercise if you've got that brush control and you've practiced. But if not, just take your time with this and enjoy it, because as you start to put those lines on, you'll really start to see the highlights come to life. Next up, we'll highlight the book on the back and any other red elements, such as the handle on the sword there, and also any of the book elements that we've got across the Grey Knight armour itself. So the first colour we're going to use for this is Wazdakka Red. Now, this is a different red to the ones that we've used previously. So this is slightly more desaturated. It's a little bit more of a pinky red. And what we're going to do is we're going to highlight the book. Now, I said previously there's a lot of texture on there, and there is. So what we're going to do is we're just going to look to where this texture is, and we're going to highlight, leaving the darker colours in all the recesses. And you'll get quite a funky pattern popping up, which I think looks quite nice. So just work your way across the book. The last highlight on the book is going to be with Squig Orange, and what we're looking to do with this is keep it inside the Wazdakka Red from the previous stage. So just take your time. Again, a good tip on your brush, I'm using my size 1, and I'm just going to paint this over those elements that I've already highlighted. And as you can see, this really starts to bring the texture of the book alive, and it gives it something really different in comparison to the rest. There's a lot of texture in this, a lot of a different look compared to the rest of the model, which is obviously quite mechanical. Next up, we're going to base all of the black elements. Now, there's a fair few across the model, so I'm using AK black. Use whatever black you want. If you want to use a Baden black, that's absolutely fine. So in terms of the things I'm looking to paint, generally it's a lot of the support elements around some of the cylinders, the pistons, the pneumatic areas of the model. I'm also looking to paint all of the wires, all of the soft ribbing as well that we've got across the model on the arms. And I'm also going to paint 1/4 of the greave and the shield in the black colour as well. So if you're not sure what that looks like, you can just have a little look at the final model, or you can have a look at the box art as well, see how they've done it. The first highlight I'm going to put on all of the black elements is going to be with Eshin Grey. Now, this is a nice highlight for black because it kind of blends in quite nicely to the colour underneath. So generally, I'm going to do some fairly chunky edge highlights, but also some area highlights with this as well, along those piston arms. I'm also going to highlight a lot of the cabling as well, just with a good tip on my brush. You can try and just drag your brush down this to get a nice highlight, but I've just gone in and just very quickly painted those highlights on. So again, work your way around it where you've got nice crisp edges, then you can drag the brush along those two to get that nice highlight. But generally, this is a fairly easy step, and you can always go back in and correct any mistakes. Next up, we'll take some Dawnstone, and we're going to do exactly the same thing with this as we did with the Eshin Grey in the previous step. The only thing we're going to focus on is making sure we get it inside the Eshin Grey. So this is going to be a sharper highlight. We're going to drag our brush across more edges to get crisper lights. When it comes to the cabling, we're going to be a little bit more deliberate with the elements that we're highlighting as well. But generally, this should be a nice, easy and straightforward step. Again, if you do get a little bit wobbly in some places, you can easily correct it with the previous colour. Again, make sure you haven't got too much paint on your brush and you've got a really good tip on there as well. That's really, really going to help. Moving on to some of the pistons on the model, as well as the cover on that incinerator weapon. Now, I wasn't really sure what to do with these, so I just decided to paint them more of a brassy colour. So I'm going to take some Balthazar Gold and I'm going to use this to layer up over them. This is a nice, easy, straightforward step. The Balthazar Gold should go over in one coat. But again, as with everything on this model, don't rush. Just pop it on there and see how it covers. You can always go in and add a second to really enhance that cover. And it just gives you a nice different colour on the model as well. So there's, again, a different element that you can look at that draws the eye. I'm not going to worry about shading these elements, but I am going to go in and highlight them. And the first highlight I'm going to do is with some Runelord Brass. And generally, I'm looking to catch this across all those things that are going to catch the most light. So for that incinerator, I'm going to paint quite a bit of it because there's quite a lot of it facing upwards. Generally, in some areas, you can just drag the brush along the edges to get a nice crisp highlight as well. But this is what's just going to push that colour slightly more towards the brass, so you'll have a different gold effect than the gold we're going to put across the rest of the model. Going to paint that nice long loincloth next, and the colour I'm used for that is Screamer Pink. Now, you could paint this in the same red that you used on the book if you wanted to save colours, but I just wanted to, again, have a different element on the model. So just base it using the Screamer Pink. Don't forget to paint the back as well. I'm showing that on camera because it was a lot easier in terms of the focus working. Once that's dry, I'm going to shade the recesses using some Nuln Oil. So again, nothing big and flash here, just get some on your brush and poke it in there. You don't want to flood the model because, again, it's just going to make the next step a bit harder. Then when it's completely dry, just go back in with some Screamer Pink and tidy up any elements where it's spilled out. We'll just put one highlight on the loincloth, and the colouring used that is Pink Horror. Now, generally what I'd say is drag this across those sharp edges of the folds and it's nice and easy and crisp. But what I've had to do here is just use the brush to draw those highlights on because of the angles of the model, which makes it a little bit more difficult. So if it does look a little bit ropey and a little bit blotchy like mine does here, just go back in with some Screamer Pink afterwards and tidy up those edges so you do get that nice crispness. Next up, we'll paint the book and any purity seals that we've got on the model. So there's one on the book and I've put an additional one on the right shoulder pad as well. So the colour I'm using for this is Rakarth Flesh. Now, this is a nice and easy, straightforward step again. The Rakarth Flesh may cover in one, but you're going to be painting over a fairly textured surface here that's got the indentations of the book writing in there. So don't flood those with paint. Use 2 coats if it's easier, because again, it's going to give you much better coverage and it's going to be much easier to move on to the next step. I'm going to shade everything using some Agrax Earthshade. So again, I want to work this into all of those recesses, so make sure all that text pops. And I want to work it into the sides of the pages as well to make sure that I get a nice little bit of definition in there. Again, key as with all the other washes we've done on the model, don't let it settle and don't let it pool in any places, because then that's going to really, really affect how you go through for the next step. So keep an eye on it. And if it does start to pull, wick it away. Once that's dry, I'm going to go back in with some Rakarth Flesh and start to highlight everything up. Now, this should be fairly easy and straightforward. Try not to get this into any of those recesses. If you do, then you can just put a little bit of Agrax Earthshade back in there. It's not the end of the world. But this just brightens those pages up quite nicely. And the final highlight on all this is with Pallid Wych Flesh, which is, again, a much brighter off-white colour. Coverage of it isn't fantastic. So just take your time with this and drag it across those pages as best you can to get that nice highlight on there to give you the outline that you need. If you make any mistakes, again, go back in with the Rakarth Flesh. If you accidentally pop some of it into those recesses, just pop a little bit of Agrax Earthshade in there as well. Work your way across this and the purity seals at the same time. You should get a nice highlight. Next up, it's time to paint the gold, and there is quite a lot of gold on this model. So the colour I'm going to use is Retributor Armour. And all I'm looking to do is very carefully paint this inside all of the gold elements, so I don't spill it on any of the armour I've already finished. Now, if you're not entirely sure which bits are gold, you can check the finished model, or you can check the box art. But generally, there is quite a lot across the model. It's really key that you do get it into all the recesses as well, not just painting it over some of those letters on all of the inserts that you've got across the Grey Knight Armour, the Dreadknight Armour as well. The key here is to really take your time because, like I said, you're going to be painting this very close to elements you've already completely finished. So it's important that you don't spill it. I mean, if you do, it's not the end of the world. You can fix them. But generally, you want to be as tidy with this step as possible. Once you've painted all of that gold, it's time to shade it, and I'm going to go for a nice warm gold. So the colour I'm using is Reikland Fleshshade. And what I'm looking to do here is to paint this across all of the gold. So when I'm going into those recesses, I really want to get it into the recesses. If you do spill it, then you can quickly wipe it off with your finger before it dries, because again, you don't want to spill the Reikland Fleshshade over all of the silver armour. So take your time with this step and make sure that it's completely dry before we go on to the next one. When it's completely dry, we'll go in and start highlighting the gold. Now, I'm using Glistening Gold from Two Thin Coats. If you haven't got this, you can use Liberator Gold from Citadel. They're kind of the same colour, so it'll work absolutely fine. What I'm looking to do is get some nice crisp highlights. So where I can, I'm going to drag the brush across the edges of the gold, and that's going to pick up and give you a nice crisp, shiny highlight. There's also a lot of text that we've got across all of those inserts. So you can very carefully go in and try and paint over all these letters, or you can just very gently wipe your brush on a bit of towel so that all the paint comes off, and then just drag it across those elements carefully. So it's a little bit like dry brushing. Well, it is dry brushing, I suppose. Just using a much smaller brush for this. So I don't use a new brush. I don't use a good brush for this. I use an older brush for this. But that'll help pick out all of that lettering. So just work your way across all of it, and you should get it to stand out quite nicely. The last highlight on the gold is going to be with white gold from Pro-Acryl. Now, this is kind of an optional step. If you haven't got white gold, you can mix a tiny bit of bright silver in with your Liberator Gold or your Glistening Gold. Not a huge amount because it'll kind of go a little bit green. And generally, we're going to use this on the most prominent parts of gold. So this is kind of going to be more of a kind of spot highlight rather than a complete edge highlight. So just work your way across the model. Less is definitely more at this stage. Don't get too caught up in getting every edge highlighted with this. Next up, it's time to paint all of the power nodes on that very big maul and any other elements on the model that you think would do with having a nice little bit of a glow on them. So I'm going to take some AK white. Whatever colour white you use is absolutely fine. If you use white Scar or something else, that's no problem at all. What you're looking to do is just paint over the elements, so you can kind of drag your brush down them a little bit. I've decided to do all the power nodes on the maul. I've decided to do the lights on the back of the model, and also some of those cables running into the side cannon and cables down the side of the head of the Grandmaster as well. Then for a nice blue glow, all I need to do is take some Frostheart contrast paint and paint this over those areas. Now straight away, this is going to give you a really nice effect. For the power maul, I have flooded the areas a little bit, because it just gives off that little bit of a blue glow effect. For in other areas, you just need to be a little bit more careful. Similarly, if you want to do a green glow, you can use something like Striking Scorpion contrast paint. But generally, this is a nice, easy and straightforward way of getting some really nice effects on the model. And there we have it. This Grandmaster in Nemesis Dreadknight Armour is done and ready for the tabletop. I really enjoyed painting something different, which has got so many different materials on there. So I really hope you enjoyed the tutorial as well. Let me know down in the comments if you've got any questions or feedback. Check out my Grandmaster Volder's painting tutorial here as well. I'll see you next time.